Okay, everyone. Happy Friday. Friday is Psychoanalysis Day at Sublation Media. So every Friday we put out a show called Sci-Fi, where we talk about matters relating to clinical and theoretical psychoanalysis, politics, the left, but as it connects to psychotherapy and psychoanalysis. Please do check out. We've had some really great guests recently. Last time out with Lenka Zupancic, and before that with Nadan Dolar, really talking about the Slovene-Lacanian school. The Lacanian-Slovene school of psychoanalysis and what that means, how it emerged, and how important it can be. Alenka also talking about conspiracy theory, which was a really great, fun one to do. Anyway, very happy to be joined today by my friend and colleague, Sergio Aguilar. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, close enough.
Coming to us all the way from Mexico. Sergio's just started a PhD there at UNAM, the National Autonomous University of Mexico, and he teaches as well at the University of Comunicación in Mexico. He teaches on film, theory, documentary, but also is a member of the sort of Lacanian Center of Research and Psychoanalysis, and really is a Lacanian psychoanalytic thinker. But he's just published really right now, right? Just come out this in the matter of days ago, right?
Yeah.
Really interesting looking new book, not yet available in English, hopefully soon, in Spanish, called a kind of English translation of the title would be To Tell the Truth in a Lie, From Documentary to Fake Documentary. And he has published also articles in English around this topic. I can also put those in the bio so that people can check out his work, and I'm sure it won't be long before this book gets translated. And it's really about the question of the question of truth. And what is truth in documentary filmmaking? Are documentaries truthful? And what does that mean, right? What does it mean to speak about truth when it comes to non-fiction and documentary, especially in documentary filmmaking? So, and Sergio takes a kind of psychoanalytic perspective or approach to questions of truth, and I guess proposes in some ways how documentaries can deal with truth differently, and how the different ways in which they deal with truths can have a really big and important impact on the subject viewing it, and so on. So let's start with the basic idea, Sergio. Like, why what do you think is the sort of issue with documentaries, and why did you choose? I mean, before we come into psychoanalysis properly, why did you come to this topic of documentary filmmaking and sort of tackle this problem of the question of truth in documentary films?
Well, thank you for the invitation here. It's an honor for me, and this topic I started working on it when I saw a documentary called "I'm Still Here." And maybe you have seen it with Joaquin Phoenix, and this. When I approached this film, I thought it was a documentary. I saw it, and it was thrilling. I loved it, and then I went to the internet to read more about what is the life and the career of Joaquin Phoenix, who's now a hip hop star, a rapper, and I realized that it was a fake documentary. So it was like a shock for me, like what has just happened. That's the first moment when I started really caring about this, and I started reading the documentary theory, what was some stuff that has been written around the topic of fake documentaries, or as the English speaking people might have read it as mockumentary. I have an issue with the term mockumentary. I prefer much more fake documentary. Maybe we can talk about it in some time. But that's the main issue that I found. It was a personal experience for me. Like I don't know what has happened to me as a spectator of this film. That's why I wanted to understand what had just happened to me. That's how I approached the issue. Yeah,
it's a great little story to begin with, and I mean, I'm sure I've been in the same situation before. I mean, I've definitely watched things where, for a certain period of time at least, I've like been confused as to whether I was watching what and I guess the question then becomes like, what and why does this distinction matter? So you felt that, from the perspective of your subjectivity or your position as the viewer, this was somehow a sort of shocking realization because it seemed to you to be a fundamental change, right, as an important distinction. So maybe you can explore that a bit more. Like, what do you think what did this do to your position as the viewer?
Yeah, well, the first approach that I had towards this topic, which is an approach that I quickly removed because I realized it was not going to be quite interesting, was that the film betrayed my trust, or that the film played tricks on me or something like that. Like I was fooled by the film. Like the film was fooling me. I realized quickly that this was not going to be quite interesting because instead of, and maybe this is, of course, I think some like a Freudian question, instead of seeing the film as fooling me, is like, what is my position towards what the film is telling me? Like a Dora is a question, like what's my own role in this foolishness, if you want to call it like that. And that's how I started approaching this stuff. And I realized that one of the main questions here, there are many, like what is true, what is the truth, are documentaries true, stuff like that. What is the role of psychoanalytic truth in documentary cinema? But maybe the first question of these big questions that I tried to address in this research was, what do I believe when I watch a film? When you watch a film that is called a documentary, this is not my idea. Michael Renov has written extensively about this. Like, how do you when you watch a documentary, you feel and you believe that you now know something that you did not know before. Like, now I know how they make a pencil. Like, I know the Second World War history. Like, now I know who was Lacan or who was Freud, because I watched a documentary. And after I watched the documentary, I know. But before you know, and this is a Zizekian topic, before you know, you believe. I mean, you have to believe that you know. You have to believe in the film itself. And I think that was the main thing, that when you try to know things, you have to take a leap of faith, which is based on a belief. You believe first, and then you can know things.
Right, I understand. So, and this would you're using that to apply. I mean, of course, it applies it all across the board, but you're not really thinking so much of mockumentaries there, but or fake documentaries, but of documentaries as such, right? So the documentary teaches you things, factual truths, maybe, but for those truths to come into being in the first place, the question of belief already has to be there, right? To structure this exchange. So this is also how knowledge and truth can be produced and so on. So maybe this is also important to ask this, how you're discussing this, because it's not, your argument is not so much that there are truths or there aren't. And I think one of the interesting comments in your early part of your essay is this question of the postmodern idea of the kind of unreachability of truth, right? So as it were, if I've understood you right, you're saying that on the one hand, we've got these, let's say historian types who believe there is, in fact, a fixed and coherent truth, and it's just a question of getting as close as we can to it. Then you follow that up with these kind of postmodernists who say, actually, you can never reach truth and so on, and there's no point trying. But psychoanalysis is a third way of thinking about this problem, where there is a place for truth, and the idea of truth structures how we experience things, but not in the original traditional sense of a kind of single individual truth. So talk us through like that kind of argument, and why how psychoanalysis can give us a third way of sort of seeing this relationship we have to truth.
These first two approaches that you just summarized are perhaps these two positions that we find in the political field today, right? The positivist approach, like there is one truth, the truth of science, the truth of the market, the truth of capitalism. Like this is how the things are going to be. There is no way out. You should accept it and try to be successful in it. And there is the postmodern. There is no truth. Everyone has its own truth. Everyone has its own side of the story and that stuff. I believe that fake documentaries. This is why I prefer the term fake documentary and not mockumentary. Because mockumentary, of course, has some connotation of mocking, like the film is mocking you. And yeah, maybe some films have that. That's what happened to me, at least. But some other films, like CSA, for example, a film that tells you the story of the USA, but they are not called the USA, but the CSA, the Confederate States of America, because the South states won the Civil War. So no one is watching the film and thinking that, wow, I thought that slavery was not legal in the US, right? No one is being, I believe, no one is being mocked or fooled by such a film. But that's why I don't like the term mockumentary, but I prefer fake documentary. And the other reason I prefer fake documentary is because perhaps the main thesis in this book is that fake documentaries are a symptom of documentary cinema. They are not they are not an enemy of documentary cinema. They are not a transvestite documentary cinema, as I once read it. Like fake documentaries are sort of a transvestite that dress as a documentary, but they are not true. I don't believe they are that. I believe that fake documentaries, as a symptom, it is for Lacanian psychoanalysis. A symptom has so much to do with the truth of a subject, the truth that constitute a subject as such. For those nerds, this is what Lacan is explaining in how do you say it in English? I don't know how's the translation, but I talk to the walls. I talk to the walls, and maybe I think that's the translation. Japar Amour is that book, the little book with three conferences. That's where Lacan explains the relation that symptom has with the truth of a subject. And I believe that fake documentaries are a symptom of documentary cinema in order to constitute this discursivity of truthfulness, of there is one historical truth, that you can know things, that you can have knowledge through documentary cinema. There is an excess. There is a plus de jour, maybe we can say it, and that escapes through this discursivity, and this enjoyment that escapes is what creates fake documentaries. So yeah, I believe that fake documentaries are not then, if you agree with me, they are not a mix or something that is between fiction and non-fiction, like a mix between fiction and non-fiction. In the same way that the unconscious is not something that is below consciousness. It's a negativity at work within consciousness itself. And that's maybe what fake documentaries are. They are not less or more than documentaries. They are a negativity within documentary discursivity itself.
So once you have this idea, you can actually see within a normal documentary this unconscious negativity functioning, even with a so-called true documentary, right? Is this the idea?
Yeah, of course. I mean, take for example a famous documentary series, How's It Made? Maybe you have seen it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how do you make orange juice, pencils, bacon, jewelry, anything. For example, if you see that some of those episodes, which are less than 5 minutes each or something like that, you are I guarantee that in most of them you are not going to see human body parts. There are just machines and products being produced. which is something I find quite amazing. For example, in the pencils, how do you make pencil? How is it made pencils episode? They have the wood coming to the factory. That's where it starts. They don't tell you where do they get that wood, how much deforestation they produce, how they corrupt governments sell that wood to other factories, that stuff. And there are just a few hands which are like quality assurance of the pencils they are producing. And that's it. In the bacon episode, for example, you see the dead bodies of the pigs coming to the factory. They don't tell you how do they maintain those pigs, and we know how much suffer there are towards animal farms, and they don't tell you that. And as you said, of course, I'm not doubting what the documentary is telling me. Those are factual truths, but there is a point where it cuts literally, where it begins and where it ends, that hides some actual truth, like the difference between factual truths and actual truths, perhaps.
Yeah. So right, yeah, and of course, I mean, it seems obvious that all documentaries would do that, right? They would omit things, cut things, but present a certain section of the truth. But what you're saying, I guess, is that visible within that is this kind of this sort of production of knowledge, I guess, that's at the heart of this, and this sort of situating of the subject in relation to the truth that is presented there, and that truth that's presented there has its own kind of unconscious that's been cut off, as it were, from what's there, right?
Yeah, kind of like the four Lacanian discourses. You can say that documentary is, of course, on the side of the university discourse. It's a knowledge being produced, is a subject of the signifier that is the product of it. And maybe fake documentaries, I'm not sure, but maybe they are on the analytical discourse, because of course there is something that is not working here in those fake documentaries, but this something that is not working is creating a new approach towards truth, towards what is truth. Another example of a very famous one, the Blair Witch Project, which I don't believe it's a fake documentary. I think it's a found footage film. That's another distinction. But if it were true that these are the tapes that were found of these three film students who got lost in the woods, how come that the tapes are edited? Because you see a field and a counter field, someone is speaking, the other one is responding. Like someone edited it. So this sort of little ideas is something that I think through film analysis can give us another level of comprehension of what is film discursivity. Some years ago, maybe you heard of this a film on mermaids. Like a mermaid was found, and it was a documentary. The first time I watched the film, when it was released about 10 years ago or so, I was fascinated. Like, is this real? What the hell is going on?
You've got a strange ability to believe things.
Yeah. But it was during when I was about half of the film, when I realized that those people who were being interviewed, who were supposedly the scientists who found this, were the same ones who were in the reenactment sections of the film. Like that film has interviews, reenactments, and archival footage, maybe. But they were the same persons who were reenactment and being interviewed. Like if they were actual scientists, they were also actors of playing of themselves. And that's when I realized that something was odd here, and that this was a fake documentary. But Barack Obama, who was the US president back then, actually pronounced on this, because it had gained a lot of media attraction, and people who were saying that the US government was, of course, hiding mermaids in some lab and that stuff. So yeah, I think that the film itself had the clues to unravel it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I got one more question about this, and I want to talk to you about the example you gave about the conspiracy theory. But first of all, on this point, it occurs to me that what you're saying is that, as it were, like, I mean, because you also talk about film theory and psychoanalysis as a way of understanding film, but it seems to me you're going a bit further than film theory and psychoanalytic film theory, because what you're saying, I suppose, is that with mockumentaries, if you want to call it that, or fake documentaries, it's not that we can use psychoanalysis to understand the film. It's that the film puts you in a different psychoanalytic position, right? Especially in relation to your conception of truth. So I think it's really like compelling what you suggest, maybe that, this one is a university discourse experience, but this other type, this fake documentary, is structured like the analyst discourse, because what it's actually doing to you then, the piece of art, is actually throwing you into a different subject position in relation to truth. Right. So it's not that. So your book is not, am I right here, is not using psychoanalysis to understand film, but actually, well, it's more like using film to understand psychoanalysis. but it's more that the film has the power. Even more than that, it's that filmmaking has the power to throw the viewing subject into a different structure, a different relationship to truth. So it actually almost as if the film is doing the work of psychoanalysis itself.
Yeah, you're right, because quite commonly you see psychoanalytic film theory as actually what we can call as applied psychoanalysis. We are using films to prove that psychoanalysis was right all along. And that's something that I don't find quite interesting. Another point of view, which I find much more fruitful towards film theory and towards psychoanalysis, is to use the theoretical tools psychoanalysis give us to understand film discursivity, not the topics that are expressed in a film. And for example, Todd McGowan is a great example of doing that. And another way to look at it is to invert the situation and try to understand try to understand psychoanalysis through film, because this is something that has quite interested me since I was starting to approach towards psychoanalysis. I was already a cinephile when I started to discover psychoanalysis, but someone told me once that, maybe psychoanalysis is useful to film, maybe, but I don't see why film should be useful for psychoanalysis. And I think that it's a quite honest question. Like, why should psychoanalysis be interested in reading film theory if it should be? And because I believe psychoanalysis, of course, should be interested in reading and knowing what the other disciplines are talking about. I mean, Freud and Lacan were not guys who were living and reading only psychoanalysis. It is a field of knowledge who should be aware of what the zeitgeist of scientific discourse, academic discourse, artistic discourse are talking about. So I was trying to approach this like, what can film theory give to psychoanalysis in a way? And I was trying to do that when I stumbled upon this topic of fake documentary. And I believe, of course, the main issue here is the position of the spectator. Like, how is a spectator positioned through film discursivity? One example, I was teaching a class this week, and a student told me that we were talking about Marvel films, superhero movies, and she told me that the last Thor movie was very bad, as she would know it would be. She knew it would be bad, but she had to see it. For me, this is a very interesting way to phrase it. I knew it was going to be a bad movie. It is a bad movie, but I had to see it. Those are the words, well, in Spanish, but those are the words she used. And for me, that's precisely the position of a spectator towards film discursivity. Films are not, they don't fall out of trees, they don't grow from the land, but they position us as spectators, as maybe you can say as subjects of desire. And it is like a trap. I mean, the film proposes you something, you accept it, the film pulls you in, you try to pull back, and that's how you became engaged in a film.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree with that. And it makes me think, I mean, maybe the question is not so much what can film theory give to psychoanalysis, but what can film discursivity give to psychoanalysis, or something like that, or film itself. And we had Elliot and I interviewed Helen Rollins, who's a filmmaker who's also working on Lacan and McGowan and things like that. And I mean, you can, if people are interested in this, they can find that in the playlist. But she was also saying this basic point that it's not about using psychoanalysis to understand film, but that she sees her filmmaking as being able to create this kind of form of relation between the film and the viewer, and through desire. So it's actually the films themselves that are doing the psychoanalytic work, not the psychoanalytic theory that's reading the film. So I think that's a great point, and I think it's interesting that you've kind of come to that kind of conclusion about these. And I actually think it's convincing. I mean, I do think I don't know what, the classic for British, I don't know, actually, I'm thinking of things like Spinal Tap, or, classics like the Brian Jonestown Massacre, the Brian Jonestown, what's that called? Anyway, there's some of these really big mockumentaries. There are loads, of course, but they really do, I think. And I could really relate to what you said when you said you couldn't believe it. There's almost this shock when you realized what you were watching, because it does deploy you as a viewer in relation to truth and in relation to your own desire, and so it does in fact help psychoanalytic thinking to emerge, even if you don't realize it's doing that, I think.
It's and this is something that this famous concept, Lacanian concept of the gaze, which has been so overused in film theory. I think that a way to understand the gaze is, as Lacan says in the 11th seminar, it's the gaze is an object. It's not like what you are seeing in the film, or your own eyes. It's an object found within the frame itself, and that's why he uses this example of the ambassadors, that painting. And the skull that is there. If you go to the National Gallery, you can see that the floor towards the left frame of the painting is like overused, like when people touch a statue too much and it becomes golden, unlike the rest of the statue. I believe that's subjectivity. That's the subject, precisely the idea that you have to go to that part of the frame to see the actual skull. Like that's how subjectivity is produced through the painting itself. And at the same time, it is in the painting itself, in the idea of this distortion of the skull. So when I put the example, I always ask the students who has never seen this painting. Some of them raise their hands, and I tell them, what do you think this is? And almost no one can guess it at the first time. So then I show them the skull, and then we go back to the painting. And I ask them, are you seeing the skull? And some of them say, yes, I am seeing it. How can it be? Because I am not showing to you. But the skull is there, and at the same time, it's not there. It is within the frame, but out of the field of vision, perhaps. And that's precisely this. I think this idea that is bothering you, that the painting is not complete because you are not seeing the skull. But if you see the skull, you lose the painting. And this overused floor in the National Gallery to go to see the skull, I think that's the subject, a subject that is confronting the painting and at the same time produced by the painting.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, and one could say that about film and art. It's not that these things comment on or critique or reveal to us subjectivity that already exists. It's that they play a role in the production of that subjectivity. I think that is a critical distinction. I totally agree. I mean, so I wanted to ask you about because I mean, I just like conspiracy theories, but one of the examples you gave is about conspiracy theory, and you say that you discuss behind the curve. So tell us about that. But what you say here is that this film it shows us the difference between knowledge and belief, and it shows you also how you can have a production of knowledge based on a kind of avowed belief. So tell us about this documentary and what it's about, and also why you think it can be helpful in making this distinction and showing us this relationship between knowledge and belief.
Yeah, well, that documentary Behind the Curve came to me after I watched a fake documentary called In Search of the Edge, which is a documentary that shows why the Earth is flat. It's a fake documentary of a host explaining to you why the Earth is flat. And then I was watching the Cosmos series with Carl Sagan, and there is an episode called The Edge of Forever. I mean, the word repeated. And in that precise episode, Sagan explains how you can know that the Earth is spherical without seeing the sphere itself. It was amazing to me because it was talking about different modes of representation. In the conspiracy theory documentary, The Flat Earth, and I cannot see the sphericity of the Earth, so and my senses are not fooling me. And what Sagan is saying that your senses will fool you, but we can use the scientific discursivity against that. And he is in a way right, I believe. But precisely what I had just said, I believe it. I believe that he's right, and that's precisely the point. So when you see a documentary like Behind the Curve, which is a documentary, it's not a fake documentary, but a documentary on people who believe the Earth is flat. The thing to realize here is how these people who have a belief that perhaps most of us, maybe each year that passes, there are fewer of us, but most of us perhaps might laugh at their belief that the Earth is flat. But they really believe it, and they, as some physicist says in the documentary, they are not people to be mocking at. They are not just stupid people or ignorant people, but they are people who believe in something and they stand by their belief. I mean, they just don't believe it, but they, how do you say that? They live their belief. They are living their belief. And that's something that I believe, neoliberalism tries to rip away from us. Like, you don't have to believe in something. You don't have to believe in an actual truth because all politicians are corrupt. They all lie. All politics is corruptions, and there are no sexes anymore. There are no genders anymore. There are no classes anymore. And in Latin America, you still hear the idea that if you are poor, it's because you want to, because the capitalism gives you the opportunity to work, to educate yourself. You don't have to be this person anymore. In the end, in the bottom end, what neoliberalism gives us is the idea that you don't have to believe in truths anymore. And I think that is very dangerous. So we do believe in truths. The truth of neoliberalism itself is to believe in neoliberalism.
So in a way, the flat earthers have a better, healthier perspective than the neoliberals.
I think that they have a more honest perspective. Yeah, I think that. I don't know if you have read the work of David Pavón Cuellar, which is a famous Lacanian Marxist, from Mexico.
I mean, he's done a lot of things with Ian Parker.
Yeah, exactly.
We haven't had him on actually, and we should. But yeah, so anyway, but I don't know what you're about to say.
He's great, and he has a little text which blew my mind when I read it. Is that perhaps you have they come out in every electoral periods, people who think that things are okay, things are great, and if you are poor, it's because you want to. If you complain of the system, is because you are a conformist, is because you don't want to work. In Latin America, that's quite often people who get money from the government are lazy people. But if you give money to the banks, you are developing your economy. That's stuff. I'm sure in England it's precisely the same way.
Yeah, we have that. Yeah.
So he was explaining this text how maybe the people who believe that are like some psychotics, because they are so obviously wrong, but they don't seem to be wrong. I mean, they should be put into maybe mental hospitals, just as if you put people who go out screaming and naked in the streets and screaming that they are the king of England now, and they would put those people in a mental hospital because they are obviously crazy, quote unquote. Why don't we put people like this there? Now in Mexico, in a big city of Mexico, there is a quite complex issue with the lack of water and drainings. And there was a guy who was tweeting about it, and he was saying, well, I cannot go to my golf course because they cannot irrigate the golf course. And he was complaining, like, I pay for this and I should be able to enjoy it. I understand that some people might not have water, but that's not my fault. I want to play golf because I paid for that golf course. And I think, why don't they put that guy in a mental hospital? I mean, the situation is so obviously horrible, complex, and he's worrying about not being able to play golf. But he's not seen as a crazy person. He is seen as a businessman, you know. And that's a horrible thing in this world, that if your belief is according to the capitalist production of subjectivity, to neoliberal subjectivity, you are not crazy. You are simply a businessman, an entrepreneur, you know. But if your belief is not working towards the capitalist production, like the belief that communism might arrive someday, that we can still believe in socialism, oh no, you are a crazy one. You are you're living in the past, or you are basically that crazy.
I mean, before I want to ask about this kind of question of atheism and science and so on as well, but I mean, just quickly on the conspiracy, I mean, I do think this is a really interesting point, that, you know, it's madness when it's a flat earther, but it's not madness when it's the belief in, well, the letting go of the belief in truth or anything. You know, that is what neoliberalism is encouraging. I mean, in Lacan's four discourses, where would you put the conspiracy theorist?
That's a very interesting question. I don't know, out of my mind, maybe in the historic discourse, right? Historic discourse. And well, I think that
and the neoliberal subject, the sort of neoliberal subject who's given up on the question of believing in anything.
Yeah, it's on the master discourse, obviously. I think neoliberal subjectivity is a product of a master discourse. But the problem with conspiracy theories is how I don't think the problem is how could people believe that the earth is not that the earth is flat, or that vaccines are triturized fetus or something like that. The problem is not the belief itself, but how do you mock that belief? I am obviously I am an intellectual and a man of the 21st century. I don't believe that stupidity, that the earth is flat. But now I am going to believe in the vaccines themselves, which are a product of a neoliberal subjectivity, of course, of neoliberal capitalism. How come did we have a vaccine against this disease so rapidly, and many other diseases do not have a vaccine yet? Is something to do, of course, with capitalist productions for a capitalist and globalized economy. And so I'm not saying that the vaccines are not useful. I'm not saying do not get a vaccine. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that you cannot fall so easily in the trap of believing in the almighty God of science. That's precisely the point that neoliberalism wants you to believe.
Yeah, and this comes on nicely to what I wanted to ask, because I think I see this point that what's healthier. That again, I'm not saying we should all be flat earthers, but what's healthier is that the flat earther at some level acknowledges that first you have belief, and that belief is what allows you to then have access to knowledge, right? Whereas the scientist believes that first you have the knowledge, and it tells you what to believe, which is the wrong way around. Yeah. So I find that really interesting. And in this piece, you were just coming onto it really, but you say that, science isn't atheist enough. It still is structured by a kind of belief in a certain kind of God. So I want to hear what you think there. And you also say that it's a kind of positivist belief in a kind of non-deceiving God and not lacking other is what you put. And I think this is a really good sort of criticism of the discourse of science, and you've answered it a little bit, but can you just kind of explain what you mean by that sort of argument?
Yeah, that idea that science is not atheist enough is from Lacan of the 16th seminar, from another to the other. I don't know if there is an English translation, perhaps a Cormac Gallagher translation. And that seminar, in a lesson by the middle of the seminar, Lacan explains that science is not atheist enough because it believes in a subject supposed to know, sujet supposé savoir. Like you believe that God does not play dice with the world, as the famous Einstein saying goes. There are rules of the universe, and through science we can get a better knowledge of those rules. But in order to discover those rules, you have to believe that there are rules to be discovered. And if you don't take that leap of faith, you cannot gain knowledge. We would be living in a pre-Descartes world, where there is an evil genius who is fooling us. So in order for science to construct knowledge, to become an S2 in the four discourses, it has to, some way to phrase it, to disavow an S1, which is the belief that we are not being fooled by an evil genius or by God. And that's why Lacan says that science is not atheist enough. I discovered a very great letter from George Cantor to Richard Dedekind, and they exchanged a few letters, and they were working on some mathematical issues, and he wrote in another language, I see it, but I don't believe it. And what I think so interesting in that phrase is that it was written in a different language. Dedekind wrote it to Cantor, and Dedekind wrote it in French. Je la vois, je ne la crois pas. I think that's how you pronounce it in French. And I mean, what he was saying is, I can see it, but I don't believe it. These sort of contradictions, I mean, how can you be seeing something and not believing, but at the same time, he continued working in the problem in this thing that he did not believe. And he had to change the language to say that. It was a confrontation, a total confrontation with truth, perhaps. And so that's what I think that Lacan refers to when he says science is not atheist enough. Like science needs to disavow this this leap of faith it took in order to construct science. And maybe conspiracy theories do not disavow that.
Yeah. This is why also in that other part of it, you talk about science as disavowed belief, right? Whereas for you, authentic belief is we not only know, but we believe. We accept that belief is part of knowing, and so on. And I think that, I mean, we should stop soon, but this goes back to the power of a film like that over its viewer, right? Because it contains information which you come to know in the course of experiencing it, but it also requires you to believe in this during this experience in order to acquire that knowledge. So it puts belief and knowledge together in a way that science tries not to, I suppose.
Exactly, because when you, as I explained in that article, which is part of the book, if you are a religious person, you cannot see proofs of God's existence, and then you become a religious person. But the proofs of God's existence are only visible because you already believe in God. You cannot see artistic movements or psychoanalytic movements or psychoanalytic schools are as decadent or as working in the master discourse. And then you propose a new way to understand psychoanalysis, but you already believe in a new way to understand psychoanalysis, and that is precisely what gives you the visibility of the decadence in psychoanalytic schools. And science and politics is the same. You cannot see as a meta language, no? You cannot see the problems of a society and then choose for this party or this other party. But the problems of society are only visible because you already have a political position in society and a political ethics. And so first there is a belief, and then you can create knowledge. And science is precisely working the other way around. Science does not it disavows this first belief, and it starts with knowledge itself, like in the example of house it made with pencils. So that maybe goes back to the title of the book. The book is called "To Tell the Truth in a Lie." That will be the translation. And what when I was trying to choose the title, which is something that took me about 2 weeks, like thinking how should it be named. It comes from a section on the plague of fantasies by Zizek, where he explains how the obsessive neurotic can it can tell a lie with truths. Zizek says it like in the guise of a truth. The neurotic, the obsessive neurotic can tell a lie in the guise of truths, and the hysteric goes the other way around. So the thing that was shocking to me is how in Spanish and also in English, you can say lie in a verbal form. You can say, I am lying, you are lying, I lie, to lie, etc. But you cannot say that with truth. You cannot verbalize truth. You are not saying, I truthed, I am truing, I don't know. In Spanish, it's the same way. You cannot verbalize truth or verdad, but you can verbalize lie, mentira. This was amazing because you can, and in a way to phrase it, you can be within lies, but truth is always through a breach. Like you can tell the truth or you can expose a truth, but you cannot be within truth. But you can be within lies. And maybe psychoanalysis is a way to go through lies in order to get to truth. Maybe I'm not sure.
No, it's a great title, and I mean, it's been really interesting to talk about. I'm sure we haven't. I mean, most of what we talked about was just from one article, so there's obviously a load more. So, I mean, we will have some Spanish listeners. So I'll put in the bio of this video the link to the Spanish book, but also to this English article, which explores some of these topics if people want to talk about them. But I mean, it's been absolutely brilliant. It's actually been one of my favorite interviews that we've done. Really, really interesting, Sergio. And it's great. It's really made me think about stuff. So thanks for coming on and doing it.
Thank you for
and
inviting
I'm
me.
Go away and watch these things. I've seen some of the ones you discuss and not others, but I just want to, think about my role as a viewer in these things. It's extremely interesting and important.
Thank you.
So thanks everyone for listening, and see you all next Friday.